Today, I'm bringing you two players I truly believe that are going to have a breakout season going into the 2023 year. Comment down below. Let me know which player you believe I have on my list, or which player you believe could have a good breakout season in their second year. And as always, go to flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to support what Zach and I are doing here. Not only do you get our articles, our rankings, our bonus content, you get all the other content creators on the side as well. So once again, go to flockfantasy.com/land, get 30% off at sign up. Let's get straight into the video. My first player that is primed to break out in his second year is a wide receiver on a team that not too many people are talking about right now, and that is Jahan Dotson. Wide receiver 25 in the community. He's my wide receiver 20 right now. And if you were to ask me or check these rankings a month ago in the community's rankings, he would have been in the mid 30s, already rising about 5 to 6 spots in the community, which is right now absolutely fantastic. And this is also a video primed to break out, also an opportunity for you to buy him now before he even skyrockets even more as we enter and get closer to the 2023 season. So let me tell you what he did in his rookie year. Only played 12 games, missed about 4 to 5 games with a hamstring injury. 35 receptions, 61 targets, over 500 yards, 7 touchdowns, finished as the wide receiver 51. And look, he was on pace to have a decent season as a rookie. And if you were to extrapolate those numbers, and if you were to really see where he would have finished, he would have finished between the range of wide receiver 25 and wide receiver 28. And that would have been over 80 targets, over 700 yards, 10 touchdowns for Jahan Dotson. And that is something that is really exciting. That is something that you can say, okay, well, he did this in his first year. Let's see what he can do in his second year, and the ceiling is going to be even higher. And right now, I feel like the ceiling is a little bit low for Jahan Dotson, and we're not necessarily drafting where he would have finished if he would have played a full 17-game season. Obviously, yes, you kind of had to play within your means and understand that he had injury history, but you also have to understand the quarterback he was playing with these past 2 years. Played with 2 different quarterbacks in Taylor Heinicke and Carson Wentz. He wasn't really favored between, when you really look at Taylor Heinicke or Carson. There was a little bit, I would say, points, like literally targets, very minuscule of favorism when you really look at Carson Wentz compared to Taylor Heinicke. But look, at the end of the day, there's a new offensive coordinator in town. There's a new quarterback in town as well, and Sam Howell. We've seen him in the last game in week 18, where he saw him kind of spreading the ball around, showing some glimpses of success over there against the Dallas Cowboys, who was playing against the full defense, who was not resting in that week 18. Sam Howell showed glimpses of success, so glimpses of that he can make these people fantasy relevant, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, and everyone else on that team. So I'm really excited about Jahan Dotson. And when you really think about this offense, and you really think about, okay, Eric Bieniemy is here as a new offensive coordinator. We saw what he did over there at Kansas City. Obviously, that was with Patrick Mahomes, that was with Travis Kelce, but now he's coming into a team where he really is going to have to scheme up plays. He has to get creative to get this offense going, especially with essentially a rookie quarterback, a quarterback going into his second year, but fully having a full start into the NFL season. So I definitely believe Eric Bieniemy is going to see and scheme Jahan Dotson a lot, especially the way he can move, the way he can be utilized in the outside, in the slot, and how good his hands are. Look, some of the things that I really wanted to bring up to you, the yards per reception, he was 11th in the league in yards per reception, which is really great. And ADOT was 4th in the league. And that is something that should not be overlooked. That's something that we need to understand and really take into account when we're looking at these year 2 wide receivers going into this season. So Jahan Dotson is definitely one of my breakout players. And I know I said this is a breakout video, but I want to give you some prices that you can pay right now for Jahan Dotson. Look, it's going to continue to rise right now. But why not try and go and get maybe, or if you want to acquire Jahan Dotson, trade away his teammate in Terry McLaurin, right? Why don't you go and trade away someone like a Michael Pittman for a Jahan Dotson? I know that's a little bit shaky. There's a guy that I'm going to bring in here earlier, which once you see that part of the video, I would even swap that. I think Jahan Dotson has a higher ceiling, but I still believe and want to get that other player. Calvin Ridley, I'm really interested to sell Calvin Ridley and acquire Jahan Dotson. What about a Chris Godwin? Obviously, it's nothing perfect in a package, but yes, absolutely, Jahan Dotson is a top guy in my eyes. rise up. He's my wide receiver 20 right now in my Dynasty rankings, and that's going to continue to rise. And I do believe when we come at the end of next year and we're in this all season, Jahan Dotson is going to be drafted, I would say, in the 3rd, 4th rounds of a Dynasty startup, and we're going to be saying this is where he should have been drafted this past year, but with those injuries, obviously that did not happen. So look, great value right now in Dynasty startups. He's still a decent value right now as well if you're trying to trade for him, and he's going to have a phenomenal 2nd year breakout season going into 2023. My second player that is primed to break out and have a phenomenal year going into the 2023 season, that is George Pickens. Absolutely. He's the wide receiver 29 in the community. He's my wide receiver 24 right now, and another guy that has slowly risen. He's risen about 2 or 3 spots. Last time I brought him in a video probably about a month or 2 ago as well. Wide receiver 31, so he's risen a little bit, not too much in the community. And a lot of times, last time I brought George Pickens in that video, a lot of people didn't love him. A lot of people don't believe in this offense. I'm a massive believer and advocate for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense with Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, and so much more, Deontay Johnson, right? And that's kind of what I really want to break down, is this offense as a whole, and because a lot of it is going to determine George Pickens' success. It's not George Pickens himself. I really want to break down how this offense is going to improve. And number one starts with Kenny Pickett. As we saw in Kenny Pickett, weeks 13 to 18, the second half of the season, he was one of the highest. He had the highest PFF grading in the second half of the season as a quarterback. You saw him ramping up. You saw him really understanding the game. You saw the game slowing down for him and him making the right decisions in the second half of the season when he got the start. Remind you, George Pickens was juggling 2 quarterbacks in Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett missing the time in and out with concussions. Same thing with Mitch Trubisky. So I think that's also a big factor. Another thing is the time that Kenny Pickett didn't have last year. Broderick Jones is a huge draft pick here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, understanding that they need to protect Kenny Pickett and give him the time to throw to his wide receivers and or tight ends going into the 2023 season. The O-line was terrible last year, a lot of inconsistencies. Kenny Pickett had the 9th fewest time in the pocket to throw, 9th in scrambling time, He was 9th in scrambling, trying to keep the play alive. 13 most throwaways, the 8th in bad throws. For Kenny Pickett, meaning that he was constantly scrambling, throwing off his back foot, trying to create opportunities. And once again, with this offensive line, with the opportunity, with Kenny Pickett staying and having more time in the pocket, is going to open the door up for George Pickens going into 2023. Now let's talk about George. Right, last year we saw Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens all on this team. A lot of people were talking about how Chase Claypool was going to be leading this team. I think at some point I did believe that. I was saying it's going to be hard for George to really take the reins in the first half of the season, and then Chase Claypool gets traded away. So from weeks 1 to 8, where Claypool was on this team with George Pickens, you saw Chase Claypool leading almost in every category. You might see it on your screen again, leading in every category in receptions and targets, and just almost yards, just under in yards, same touchdowns, but also the fantasy finishes, wide receiver 38 versus wide receiver 51 for George Pickens. But now when you see when Chase Claypool, is no longer on this team from weeks 10 to 18 without Chase Claypool, had more receptions, more targets, more yards, more touchdowns, and he had a higher wide receiver finish than wide receiver 29. So if we see that second half of the season and him really taking the next step with Kenny Pickett, I think that is a huge factor. One other thing is that Matt Canada is also a big thing here. Matt Canada really needs to get more creative in this offense, and this is a concern that I have, but I'm really leaning on this offense and Matt Canada and Mike Tomlin with the history that they have to really get creative here, because George Pickens this past year, literally what he did was he ran 9 routes, just running straight down the field. He had 32.4% of his route running was 9 routes. And when I really looked into that, that's not George Pickens only running that route. That is the play call and the box that they put George Pickens in. So does he need to improve his his route tree, or do they need to get more creative in this offense? Because we saw last year where Deontay Johnson was always just getting the quick slants, and that's why he had almost 140 plus targets last year. And Deontay Johnson, we need to get more creative in the play calling with Matt Canada. Look, George Pickens, I truly do believe is primed for a breakout year. Kenny Pickett is a huge factor here. George Pickens is going to get, and Matt Canada are going to get more creative in the route tree, in the play calling, and we're going to be seeing a massive step here. I will not be surprised if we see George Pickens finishing as a top 20 wide receiver going into the 2023 season, and he will going to be wanting and wishing that you bought him on the low. Once again, wide receiver 28 right now in the community. He's actually risen since I done this video. He was wide receiver 29. I just checking now. He's wide receiver 28, so risen one spot. I did want to bring some opportunities if you guys wanted to buy George Pickens on the low right now. Here are some players and some opportunities that you can bring to acquire George Pickens. I did bring Jahan Dotson. I'd rather have Jahan Dotson, but if you are a George Pickens lover, I'm okay with the swap if you really want to go there. Javonte Williams, can I still send Javonte Williams and acquire George Pickens? Can I send Terry McLaurin and get George Pickens? Michael Pittman, I think could be a conversation there with Michael Pittman or George Pickens. Deebo Samuel, you can get George Pickens and more in return if you were to trade away Deebo Samuel. What about Calvin Ridley? I think you can also, oddly enough, even though Calvin Ridley's wide receiver 31, I do believe you can get more in return for George Pickens, for Calvin Ridley. You can send Calvin Ridley maybe the third, get George Pickens in a third or a late second, whatever the case may be, for Calvin Ridley, maybe to a contending team. So there's some options that you can go out and try to get. Once again, George Pickens and Jahan Dotson are my two wide receivers that are going to be breaking out going into the 2023 season. Comment down below, let me know if you really truly believe, and who are your wide receivers you believe are going to break out in the 2023 season. And as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh,
it's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.